Hey, thanks for checking out the Not So Narrow Cast. Please subscribe and like if you enjoy my videos and what I post, so you get some more eyeballs on them. So there's a different Pat McAfee controversy that's risen its head over the past week, other than the Aaron Rodgers one that you keep hearing about, whereby Aaron Rodgers repeated some comments about the Epstein list and sort of joked about Jimmy Kimmel, or a feud he has with Jimmy Kimmel in there, and that's caused some controversy. And they're going back and forth. But I want to talk about the other one that sort of went under the radar, even to me, which is on January 5th, Pat McAfee on his show discussed how a powerful ESPN executive called Norby Williamson has been attempting to sabotage his show. This was captured by the Awful Announcing Twitter site. So let's go ahead and watch this clip. It's 2 minutes.
Oh, so beautiful.
It was beautiful.
Almost crashed the car on the
Anyways, we're very appreciative, and we understand that more people are watching the show than ever before. We're very thankful for the ESPN folks being very hospitable. Now, there are some people actively trying to sabotage us from within ESPN.
Funny.
More specifically, I believe Norby Williamson is the guy who is attempting to sabotage our program. I'm not 100% sure. That is just seemingly the only human that has information, and then somehow that information gets leaked and it's wrong, and then it sets a narrative of what our show is. And then are we just going to combat that from a rat every single time? I don't know. But like, somebody tried to get ahead of our actual ratings release with wrong numbers 12 hours beforehand. That's a sabotage attempt. And it's been happening basically this entire season from some people who didn't necessarily love the old edition of the Pat McAfee show to the ESPN family.
Sure.
There's a lot of those. We've heard them anonymously quoted in the Washington Post, in the New York Post, in the New York Times, in the LA Times, in Wall Street Journal. And they're never like, yeah, love the show.
This is awesome.
It's always like little things to try to tear us down. So even with the enemy within our own camp, somebody that I don't like that guy. That guy left me in his office for 45 minutes, no-showed me in 2018. So this guy has had zero respect for me. And in return, same thing back to him for a long time. So even with that taking place and potential PR, like we're still growing somehow.
Yep.
So we're very thankful.
Yeah.
I think we're doing it right. We're trying to do it as right as possible. We have good intentions every single time we come in here. We don't always get it right, but motherfuckers been getting it wrong for a long time in this specific field. Long time.
MFR.
Every day. Every single day. What do you mean? Like you said, you have the right intentions. Like
When's
we're trying to sit here and have fun and talk about sports.
Bingo.
And Connor and other stuff as well might pop in here or there.
Every now and
We can stay away from those.
Not that I don't.
Yeah,
Sometimes we have to talk about them because it is so relevant. And just wait for the bird bomb that's going to drop. There's going to be a bird bomb this year. I know it.
Okay. So I've got some material on this and just want to discuss some things about it. I'm a fairly new viewer of the Pat McAfee show. I saw it a few times on the internet and knew him from WWE appearances and things like that. I actually remember him as a punter. And my joke about the webcam, AJ Hawk, also, I just use my laptop webcam for now. So anyway, Pat's making a point that their viewership is rising and there's rats inside ESPN, which is owned by Disney. And I'm going to get to this. Who are trying to sink the show and who didn't want him signed in the first place, who are leaking information and things like that. This relates to the Aaron Rodgers thing. First off, because Pat claims that he owns his show and the IP outright, and he's sort of, I guess you could say, licensing it to Disney or whatnot for quite a bit of money. But we don't know the actual terms of that, whether they can terminate the contract and how much he would get out of it, and if he does actually have full control. But assuming he does, that would rub people the wrong way. They also don't sort of like outsiders a lot of times coming into ESPN. For example, Barstool Sports, who's a lot more assholes than McAfee. They had a show on ESPN for like a week, and they really offended, and a partnership, and they really offended Samantha Ponder and got taken off the air. But Pat's show, it's quality. I'm not going to say it's the greatest show I've ever seen or anything like that. He's very mild in a lot of ways. But as far as ESPN goes, It's the best football talk by far. Some of the best interviews. And just more serious, and it's also funny. Once you get the hang of it, what I would call his stooges, his sidekicks, are amusing, and he has a lot of good interviews. Now, Aaron Rodgers was always an interesting interview on there, and he's been catching flack for quite a while now because of some of his vaccination and COVID comments. I have some thoughts about COVID that are not similar. I'm not as big. I'm not focused on the vaccine. I'm focused on that. COVID has basically been proved to be a man-made mutation of a virus that was created in the Wuhan virology lab and either escaped or was leaked out intentionally. I tend to think it escaped, but there was a giant cover-up that occurred immediately by things like the Lancet letter, EcoHealth Alliance, Fauci's in bed with it, and some other things. And that's not a conspiracy at this point. The vast majority of the evidence, according to a variety of sources, is that it's man-made. It didn't just coincidentally arise in the city in China where their leading virology lab is, who had been doing the kind of research on creating mutated viruses, which is illegal technically since Obama made some rules on it, which is what Fauci broke those rules continuously pre-COVID and denied it. But let me get back to this point. So a lot of left-wingers, they love the COVID mandates, and they made it a political thing. That's one reason they said it was a natural origin, because they didn't want Trump being right that it was came out of China and it was man-made. It wasn't natural origins. So they haven't liked Aaron Rodgers for some time. They sort of group him in the Joe Rogan thing of this guy talks about a lot of weird shit, and some of it's not proven conspiracy. Some of it is. So it's against the mainstream, so we don't really like him. We don't trust him. So then recently, Aaron Rodgers went on there and had some comments about the Epstein list that's going to be released, supposedly, of who's visited his island and whatnot, and joked about Jimmy Kimmel being on there, and they have a history. Now, Jimmy Kimmel is a golden boy at Disney, despite shitty ratings. He used to be funny back in the day, but he's become one of the more serious Hollywood sycophants for the woke culture of the left, and so he's almost untouchable. He's the most company man when it comes to sort of the party line of the far left wing that's taken over the left, unfortunately, and Disney, which I'll also get to. So the point being is the latest backlash was amplified by sources inside ESPN, such as Norby Williamson, who he's mentioning here. There also were leaks and mentions about how McAfee's ratings are lower than First Take right before it, which first off doesn't account for the fact that McAfee does big numbers on streaming and like YouTube and things like that. Now, I know Disney doesn't necessarily get those revenues, but just factually, if you add it all up, you'd have to compare the ratings that way. Also, it doesn't factor or mention what the ratings were of the show on previously before McAfee, which I assume were lower too. First Take is sort of their flagship show at this point, whether you like or dislike the show intensely. But let me just go over some more about this, and I'll show you some other information. McAfee said he loved a number of ESPN executives, including Bob Iger. Now, that's a kiss-ass statement and a mistake, or else he's been charmed by Iger. But I'm going to show you some more information about Disney and their stock performance and what they're putting out and how well it's doing financially and the political messages in these. So there were some other people that agreed. So here's sort of a recap of the Aaron Rodgers thing. Of course, Jeffrey Epstein died shortly after he was arrested by suicide in jail, and there was no footage of it. That got erased somehow. And, a lot of people were buddy-buddy with Epstein from way back. This doesn't necessarily mean they were participating in his sex orgies and his nefarious sort of recruiting of underage women, mostly from Florida and things like that. But there also are suggestions he had a lot of blackmail on people. But there's a variety of people that partied on his island. Whether they did illegal shit, that's a different story. And Jimmy Kimmel got extremely defensive about this, but I don't think it's necessarily because of him. I think he's protecting and worried about his Hollywood cronies. When you look at Hollywood, I mean, Weinstein got taken down. I knew about Weinstein for years and years before this because I read between the lines on things, and I certain industry sources, certain things. I knew about Bill Cosby for years and years before it happened. Who else did I know about? There were a couple others that I knew about from various celebrity insider sites, from reading between. Oh, Roger Ailes, I knew about him too, being a sexual harasser. I read an unauthorized biography about him, and they laid it out, clear accusations from women, and that took a long time to come out. Nonetheless, Norby Williamson. So let me talk about who is Norby Williamson. He's an extremely powerful man at ESPN who's been there, who's been an EVP there since 2005. What I found interesting on his Wikipedia is he was formerly critical of Stuart Scott's "booyah" catchphrase and once told Bob Levy his beard looked stupid. So being critical of Stuart Scott's "booyah" catchphrase strikes me as a little racist, because Stuart Scott was really the first kind of anchor on ESPN SportsCenter who used any kind of like black pop culture references whatsoever. Now you hear it all the time, and you hear a lot of things quoted. But Stuart Scott, and he was very mild. Stuart Scott, if you were coming from a hip hop background or something like that, like I was, or knew about pop culture, he was very mild. So the fact that this guy is critical of that could be looked at as a little bit racist in retrospect. Something else I want to mention is Pat McAfee being attacked in such a quick time, his show and Aaron Rodgers. But previously, the vaccine thing, but more recently, ESPN being basically like, we don't want to get into politics is what they're implying. However, if you remember during COVID and during all the riots and protests that occurred after certain things in 2020 and whatnot, ESPN had a good year or two of almost every show having political commentary on it, all from the same perspective, constantly discussing racism in society. And so many people were like, we don't want to hear politics on this. So I can understand they might feel that about McAfee, but the hypocrisy of it was very, very, very few people at ESPN were got in trouble for doing this or reprimanded. One of the only ones, I believe, was Jemele Hill. And Jemele Hill and Michelle Beadle both are obviously not fans of Norby Williamson, because there was a tweet, the tweet about McAfee criticizing him. Michelle Beadle's like, well. And Jemele Hill's like, I can relate. So this guy is a corporate, I guess I would consider him a corporate worm who's climbing the ladder at ESPN. And he has his likes and dislikes, but he's looking to gain favor with the big shots. He's an executive climbing the ranks. And ESPN was for a while the main cash cow of Disney. I don't know if it necessarily is as much anymore with cable subscriptions going down, but a guy who was in charge of Disney, or one of the big shots, is somebody who could rise through the company. So let's take a little bit deeper dive into, and Jemele Hill's also been commenting about this. There were narratives, and Michael Smith and I were hosting the Sixth. We knew when Norby took over the show, he didn't really want us to be anchors. Now, she was talking politics from a left-wing perspective, but she was the fall guy, apparently, because there were a whole lot of people and athletes that were nonstop about it on there. And she's one of the only ones that really took the fall. If you look at the layoffs they did the last couple of years, I think about 90% of the layoffs were white analysts, just bottom line. And I'm not coming at this from a racist perspective. I'm just coming at it from like truth. I think you shouldn't be racist against anybody based on the color of their skin, white, black, any shade of brown, etc. But I want to do a little deeper dive into Disney. Disney's movies have sucked for a while now. You know this. I know this. There's a lot of content about this if you pay attention at all. If you're into movies and into pop culture. Really, I would say since Avengers Endgame, they've sucked. In the last two Avengers movies were probably the two greatest superhero movies ever made, and made like record box office. And since then, Disney is the spearhead. There's a lot of streaming companies and content companies doing this, but Disney is the most clear, obvious example where virtually all the casting of lead characters is a female of some sort of color and diversity. There's very little heterosexual relationships shown. White straight males are pretty much depicted as evil or incompetent or primitive or, need to be overturned. And rewriting history, some companies are doing actual history, basically, that's fine if your content is good. But they're taking existing IPs, first off, because no Marxist, no woke agenda type of people throughout history who are writing something just to give a political message have ever created good intellectual property. What came out of the Soviet Union? What came out of Mao's China? It comes out of capitalism. And the point being is they're not coming up with their own ones, but they're deforming old IP. And a lot of people, hardcore fans, are saying they're ruining the old IP. Star Wars being one that's constantly mentioned. Marvel's gone down the tubes. The Disney princesses, the Disney classic cartoons. This is what built Disney stock. Was they bought those. They didn't own Marvel. They didn't own Disney. And Disney used to be the most traditional family entertainment company, almost too conservative that way. And they've swung primarily due to Bob Iger, the president and CEO currently of Disney. So far the other direction, the pride stuff, the trans stuff, every single thing, that they are now firmly a political left company, unless there's a regime change there. Now, normally in capitalism, companies have tended to stay away from politics, but recently a lot have joined because of BlackRock and some other things, projecting sort of a fake woke capitalism, things like that, because Disney is obviously hypocritical, if you've looked into this at all, in terms of how they treat China, whereby they scrub black actors from posters because China, and quite honestly a lot of Asia, is racist. But at home, they're jamming this. They also cut out homosexual kisses and lesbian stuff from the Middle East and places like that. And they're not the only one, but they're the most obvious, largest example. And a lot of people are just angry because this was great entertainment and they don't need to recast everything as a woman, as a female version, and a diverse cast. They don't need to do this. They're choosing to do this to push an agenda and a mindset that they think everybody should have. And trying to redress perhaps stuff from Hollywood in the past. But the bottom line is, the Marvel, for example, they were created as comic book characters. They were white. There were a few black ones. Luke Cage. I can't even think of their names right now. The Falcon. There were some, and there were more as time went along. Black Panther. And there were more female ones as time went along. But but then, like, for example, George Lucas created the Star Wars movies. He wrote these as white characters. And some aliens and things like that. But nonetheless, they could change the color, but to change the story and to ruin them, like what they've done in quite a few of these, and some of the god-awful ones. But let's just take a look at some of the numbers. So, and of course, Pat McAfee's show is on ESPN, owned by Disney. Just want to look real quickly at Disney's market share, box office. Sort of flat for quite a long time. Then the Marvel movies with the Infinity War. But since then, down. Now, this is just 2024, but downtrend. That's a bad financial omen. You look at the top grossing movies of all time. Disney's top grossing movies of all time. This is inflation adjusted. This is more important than just flat grosses. Inflation adjusted. The last time they had a movie in the 2020s, there's not one on the list of their top 25 grossing movies since 2020. And they can blame COVID. They can blame the writer's strike. That's bullshit. Other companies have gone through it. it's self-inflicted. And also, in addition to that, their movies are insanely expensive. That they're spending like 200 to 400 million on them. Plus, some sources say that double the listed budget is actually what's spent with marketing and whatnot. Avengers Endgame, Avengers Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Incredibles 2, etc., etc. And of course, like they didn't put out the original Star Wars at the time, so that's not a Disney movie. They didn't put out the Lord of the Rings movies. This is just their movies. And again, their market shares dropped quite a bit. This is like their top ones by year. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was their last big hit, basically. And that is not a woke movie. It was directed by James Gunn, who's sort of got independence there from previous success. And he's taking an IP that's actually very quirky and unique, and I like it a lot. I didn't like the second one, but so there was anticipation for that. But the Captain Marvel and the fucking all the sequels and the Shang-Chi and the Ant-Man ones, just no desire at all. And when you watch, if you go to some of these nerdtastic type sites, they break down specifically the plot and the casting decisions in these movies, which are a formulaic woke agenda. That's just, there's no other way to put it. And it's actually has its roots in Marxism. But let's look at their 2023 movie output. Okay. Again, I'm not going to list how much these movies cost to make. And this doesn't account for what they might make back on streaming, although the Disney Plus streaming services is losing a lot of money right now. If these movies cost $200 million, let's say, Guardians of the Galaxy was a moderate hit. Little Mermaid, possibly a moderate hit. These live-action remakes have looked pretty horrible to me, but I'm not a young woman who might be more of the target audience. Ant-Man and the Wasp, these are widely known to be flops. So I don't have the budgets. I didn't bother looking them up, but they're probably 300 to 400 million. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Indiana Jones one, which, Elemental, The Marvels, one of the worst grossing superhero movies of all time. Haunted Mansion, one they did off a ride at Disneyland, and they previously had success with Pirates of the Caribbean, which is one I did not expect to be a success, but it was. Wish, they just put that out around Christmas, I believe, and that was supposed to be a return to Disney simplistic, more traditional storytelling. But people are pretty fed up with Disney and more mistrusting of their content. They're not gonna I got to go out and see the new Marvel movie. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, that's a carryover from 2022. Nightmare Before Christmas. So two 1993 movies are in their top movies of the year. But bottom line is there's multiple flops there. There's multiple flops in 2022. Big flops. So you would think in the capitalist world, normally this would result in some executives being under threat, regime change. Specifically Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy is in charge of Lucasfilms and also just sort of the big creative force in a lot of their movies. 2022, Black Panther and Doctor Strange. So these are probably around a break even. And Thor: Love and Thunder. Buzz Lightyear, huge flop. Strange World, not even really sure about that one, etc. They've had a lot of major flops the last few years. And it's not looking good for their upcoming Snow White, and they don't have any Star Wars movies apparently in the pipeline because I didn't even see their last Star Wars movie, but apparently they completely gutted Luke Skywalker as a hero. They gutted apparently Indiana Jones as a hero. Why? Because they're white males, straight white male. It's not anything deeper than that. It's not any kind of good storytelling. But first off, come up with your own IP. That's good. Then you can talk, or at least do quality versions of it. And don't just put a formula in of we're going to replace the actor with a diverse woman of color. We're going to attack the patriarchy. We're going to attack the West. We're going to attack the right wing as all the evil ones. We're going to promote trans concepts to children, which the vast majority of, there's not that many things like 65% plus of American people believe in, but 65% of American people plus believe that you should not be exposing children to trans agenda things, such as discussing it with them, really. They're too young for that. But let's take a look at Disney's stock price, because normally in the capitalistic world, this will result in changes happening. But to some degree, Disney's so embedded right now. Iger's so rich and powerful. And also BlackRock has taken it upon itself in recent years to, which is one of the biggest financial service companies, to basically force companies into a so-called woke agenda through ESG ratings and things like that. They've both had these transformations primarily just due to their CEOs sort of becoming part of the leftist elitist establishment and sort of like wanting to fit in well with their peers is the best way I can explain it. But sooner or later, this should come home to roost on Disney, or else capitalism is sort of broken. If they don't care about losing money as a company on movies, something's wrong with big capitalism, because these are publicly traded. So Disney's stock was basically flat from the late 90s to the 2000s. Now, it does pay dividends and things like that, but it had a meteoric rise, as did many stocks. But just to look at this one on a monthly basis, meteoric rise, which peaked a little bit after Avengers Infinity War. But since then, it's been on a downward spiral. And it's drastically underperformed the market. So you see, it's back to 2020 levels, but really it's back to 2015 levels. And it could go down, if you say a 50% retracement of this, it could go down to 2013 levels. This is what shows that Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy are doing a shitty job, and really aren't in any position. And Norby Williamson, they're not really in any position to get on Pat McAfee about some controversial comments by Aaron Rodgers. They need to be looking within and going, maybe we're a little out of touch with what people want to see in America, Europe, and around the world. Maybe we shouldn't destroy these incredibly valuable brands and IPs that we purchased and the ones we created in our past library in the name of spreading a political agenda. Bob Iger, former weatherman, immaculate corporate ladder climber. He took over Disney in 2005 from Michael Eisner in a not friendly thing. They bought Pixar. He was very good at acquisitions. That's what really built Disney in the modern age. It wasn't the past library and goodwill and the amusement parks and things like that. Bought Pixar for $7 billion. Bought Marvel for $4 billion. Bought Lucasfilm for $4 billion. 2012. He also opened a $6 billion Shanghai Disney resort. They've sucked up to China a lot. Made deals with Fox. Then he resigned in he announced his intention to resign in 2020 and put in Bob Chapek as the new CEO. However, so 2.5 years later, Chapek was ousted by the Disney board with Iger reinstated as CEO. So he's the CEO now. He's in his 70s. He is very stubborn about admitting Disney is making mistakes and is too woke and their movies are flopping. If you watch recent interviews with him, even one where Elon Musk told him to go fuck yourself, CNBC type interviews, he's in denial. He's doing corporate speak. And there is a little bit of shareholder pushback. There's some shareholder, sort of like shareholder rights by some large ones, but they're having a little trouble getting the institutional support to oust him. But it also sort of is familiar with those of you who are sort of familiar with the saga of Vince McMahon and WWE/F in terms of clinging on and not wanting to let go. There's a lot of now he's not a creator of the company, but there's a lot of boomers who they're notorious for not giving up power once they have it, and preaching a liberal philosophy to everybody below them. Lorne Michaels, SNL, Vince McMahon, Donald Trump, not in preaching a leftist agenda, but not giving up power, Biden. They're notorious for this, and then they want to preach to others. My dad's like this. He's a high-level college professor. I think he's an assistant dean now. He's always been a leftist, but when he hires for jobs now, they'll be like, we want a lesbian woman of color. No joke. And I said, well, Dad, you wouldn't be hired under the rules you're prescribing. Shouldn't it be the best person? It's understandable. You could say, well, we want to give some opportunities to people, but in general, you want the best person. And there is active discrimination that's gone on in universities against Asian and white people, and to some degree, I believe, Indian and Pakistani people. This is resulting in some unqualified people literally being graduated from schools, but definitely a lot of brainwashing going on in schools, way more than ever before. And the roots of this were planted in the 1960s. They've come home to roost really since Trump and COVID. That's when the left went hard left and took over a lot of shit. Now, one of the big enemies mentioned by a lot of people is Kathleen Kennedy, who is sort of in charge of movie production at Disney. She's specifically more Lucasfilms, but if you look up interviews with her with the cast of a bunch of different movies, they literally come out, it's all women, and mostly they're all diverse except her. They literally come out and say, we don't need the men characters in this, or fuck the men, overturn the patriarchy. The old story's old-fashioned. He's actually an enemy, blah, blah, blah. And South Park did a Panderverse special episode a few months ago attacking her. Well, basically, they are mocking her. They basically recast South Park as that would be now. It's like, how about come up with your own cartoon? Why I feel it shows a weakness in your content. And if you do decide to do this, have a good story along with it. Have good characters. Don't just be, we're going to do this, and the women are going to be the superheroes, and they're going to fight against evil white right-wing businessman. That's the gist of it. Now, this woman, she needs to be ousted. Bob Iger needs to be ousted partially because he has not gotten rid of her yet. She's the one creating these blockbusters that are flopping after flopping after flopping. I could show you some more quotes of her in interviews, but you can look them up yourself. And, Disney's not the only one doing this. There's a variety of reasons that some things are going on. If you look at Amazon and Netflix, there's a complete, there's actually, I read a report of the lack of sex scenes in general, specifically heterosexual sex scenes, has been on the decline in movies for quite some time. There's a big rise, obviously, in homosexual and lesbian depictions and trans. But some of this is not just the woke culture. It's that they're appealing to a global audience on these streaming services. They're sucking up to it. So even though people in the West might want to see some of these things, when they're going out to India, the Middle East, and China, they have to cut a lot of it out. So it's just not in there. Of course, we have a glorification of violence, but sex and nudity, no. Heterosexuals, no. And I'm sure I'm going to piss some of you off with this. The pander stone trying to fight racism. So I sort of wanted to tie in this Pat McAfee thing to all of this. It's not directly related, but it is related in terms of Disney execs going after a certain kind of content, looking to censor. And Pat McAfee is not a political. He doesn't want his show to be political. He wants it to be entertainment and about sports. And he does put out a positive message a lot if you watch it, which is a bit refreshing in some ways. And I can understand people liking that aspect of it. At first you might be like, oh, that's cheesy, but he generally tries to be a positive person. Sometimes I wish the humor was a little more hard edge, and sometimes I wish his interviews were a little more hard edge. I don't like seeing him kiss up to coaches like Arthur Smith about stuff and various things. But as far as the quality of it, compared to the other ESPN shows, this is like Pulitzer Prize winning. So that's it. Sorry for the long rambling rant. wanted to, and how it veered. I wanted to get into a little bit more about Disney as a whole, who owns ESPN, who's a giant megalith of corporate America. And the most glaring example, one that's gone extremely woke, their stock price is diving. Their movies are not doing well. Their products are not doing well. And yet the executives, the two most powerful ones, or the two most ones responsible for the way they're headed, are still have jobs. And this shouldn't go on, because if they leave, things could go back a little more to normal. They can try to salvage some of these IPs, or maybe crazy idea, come up with a new IP. Toy Story was a new IP when it came out. There's a lot of them, but now it's just churning out shitty rehashes, but throwing in diversity and gay characters into them. And you know it as well as I do. You may get offended. It's just reality. All right, thanks for checking out. Please subscribe for future videos. I don't do that many long rambling rants like this on this channel. I might start doing a few more relating to sports in particular. And please subscribe and like the videos so they can get seen by some people. Thanks. Have a good one.